Sit down.
Nobody asked you. My mother's voice cut through the dining room like a blade. I was standing at the head of the table, my hands trembling, trying to explain why I deserved to be part of the estate discussion. My brother Tyler smirked from across the table, fork in hand, completely unbothered. My aunt nodded in agreement with my mother. My uncle looked away. I had driven 3 hours for this dinner, rehearsed what I would say for days, and she dismissed me in 5 words. The room fell silent except for the clink of silverware. Nobody defended me. Nobody even looked uncomfortable. I felt my face burn with humiliation as I slowly sank back into my chair. My mother continued talking about Tyler's new business venture like I hadn't spoken at all, like I wasn't even there. I finished my meal in silence, excused myself quietly, and walked to my car. As I drove home through the dark highway, my hands still shaking on the steering wheel, I remembered something my father told me 2 months before he died. Something about his will that nobody else seemed to know. My name is Bethany. I'm 29 years old, from Columbus, Ohio. If you're reading this, please subscribe to my channel for more fascinating stories like this one. Trust me, you'll want to see how this ends. The 3-hour drive home felt like 3 minutes and 3 years at the same time. I replayed every moment of that dinner. The way my mother waved her hand dismissively when I stood up. The way Tyler leaned back in his chair with that entitled grin. The way everyone else just watched it happen. This wasn't the first time I'd been silenced in that house. It was just the loudest. Growing up, I was always the responsible one. I studied hard, got good grades, took care of things when they needed handling. Tyler was the charming one, the funny one. The one who could do no wrong. When Dad got sick 5 years ago, I was the one who moved back home. I was the one who drove him to appointments, managed his medications, dealt with insurance companies. Tyler visited maybe twice a month, usually for Sunday dinner. But somehow, in my family's eyes, he was still the golden child. I pulled into my apartment parking lot around midnight. My roommate Vanessa was already asleep. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, staring at nothing, feeling completely erased. I couldn't sleep that night. Around 2 in the morning, I remembered the box. After Dad died 8 months ago, I'd brought home a few of his personal belongings. Mom said she was organizing his office and I could take whatever I wanted before she donated the rest. I took a box of old papers, some photos, his favorite coffee mug. I'd barely looked through it since then. I pulled it out of my closet and set it on my bed. Inside were birthday cards, old receipts, random documents. Then I found it. A manila envelope with my name written on the front in Dad's handwriting. I remembered this envelope. 3 months before he died, when I was organizing his paperwork, I'd asked Mom about it. She glanced at it and said it was irrelevant, just old financial stuff that didn't matter anymore. I'd believed her. But now, sitting alone in my apartment at 2 in the morning, I opened it. Inside was a letter dated 4 months before Dad's death. It started with, "To whom it may concern regarding the Morrison Family Trust." I didn't know we had a family trust. The letter referenced responsibilities, conditions, and oversight requirements. Names of institutions were listed. Legal terms I didn't understand filled the second page. I spent the next morning researching everything in that letter. The Morrison Family Trust had been established by my grandfather in 1987. My father became the primary trustee when my grandfather died. The trust held significant assets including property, investments, and a small charitable foundation. According to the documents I found online, the trust had specific conditions for distribution. Beneficiaries had to meet certain requirements. A designated family member had to provide annual oversight. There were accountability measures built in. None of this had ever been mentioned to me. Meanwhile, I knew exactly what Tyler was doing. 2 weeks ago, he'd posted on social media about his new luxury car. Last month, he'd taken a vacation to Hawaii with his girlfriend. At the family dinner, he'd casually mentioned looking at investment properties. He was spending money like he'd already inherited millions. But from what I was reading, the inheritance wasn't automatic. It wasn't guaranteed. And most importantly, it wasn't unconditional. I called my friend Marcus, who worked as a paralegal. I asked him general questions about trust law, careful not to reveal too much. He explained that trusts often have requirements that must be met before distributions happen. If those requirements aren't met, he said, the money doesn't move. I spent the next week digging through everything I'd saved from my time caring for Dad. For 3 years, I'd been the one managing his life. I'd paid his bills from his account, kept records of every medical expense, saved every receipt he asked me to save. Keep copies of everything, he'd told me repeatedly. At the time, I thought he was just being thorough. Now I understood. He was preparing me. I found folders full of documents. Statements from accounts I didn't know existed. Receipts for donations to charities. Records of property taxes paid. Notes about annual requirements. My father had been meticulous. He'd kept track of everything the trust required, every condition that needed to be met, every deadline that had to be honored. And in the margins of several documents, he'd written my name. Not Tyler's. Mine. I remembered a conversation we'd had one night while I was giving him his medication. He'd looked at me seriously and said, "You're stronger than you think, Bethany. When the time comes, you'll know what to do." I hadn't understood then. I was starting to understand now. Instead of confronting anyone, I decided to take action quietly. I applied for a position at the Riverside Foundation, a nonprofit organization that managed charitable trusts and estate distributions. It was entry-level work, well below my previous position as a project coordinator at a marketing firm. My mother, if she even noticed, would think I was settling for less. She wouldn't understand it was strategic. I got the job within 2 weeks. During my training, I learned how charitable trusts worked, what legal obligations trustees had, and what happened when those obligations weren't met. I learned about oversight requirements, annual reporting, and the consequences of negligence. One day during lunch, my supervisor Karen mentioned a case similar to my family's situation. Family thought they'd inherit everything automatically, she said. Turned out the trustee hadn't filed proper reports in years. The whole distribution got frozen until they sorted it out. My heart started pounding. I asked careful questions. She explained that courts took trust conditions seriously. Even unintentional violations could delay distributions for months or years. I went home that night and looked at my father's paperwork with new eyes. I started seeing patterns I'd missed before. 3 months into my new job, I attended a workshop on family trust administration. The speaker described a case study that sounded exactly like my father's trust. A family trust established decades ago. Clear conditions for inheritance. A trustee who died without properly transferring authority. Beneficiaries who assumed everything would continue automatically. The problem, the speaker explained, was that nobody read the actual trust document. They just assumed they knew how it worked. My hands went cold. During the break, I approached the speaker and asked general questions about what happens when trustees die without proper succession planning. Depends on the trust language, she said. Sometimes there's a designated successor. Sometimes the court has to appoint someone. Sometimes there's a family member named as a fallback authority. That phrase stuck with me. Fallback authority. That night, I requested copies of public records related to my father's estate through the county clerk's office. It took 2 weeks, but the documents arrived. And there, buried in the legal language, I found my name listed not as a beneficiary, but as alternate oversight authority if the primary trustee failed to meet conditions. I found out about the second family dinner from Tyler's girlfriend's Instagram story. There was my mother, my brother, my aunt, and uncle, all gathered around the same dining room table. The caption read, "Family Planning Session." I hadn't been invited. The exclusion stung worse than being silenced. At least at the first dinner, I'd been there to be dismissed. This time, they didn't even want me in the room. I stared at that photo for a long time. In it, Tyler was gesturing broadly, probably talking about his plans. My mother was smiling at him with obvious pride. Nobody looked like they missed my presence. Nobody seemed to think anything was wrong with leaving me out. But their exclusion confirmed something important. They thought I was powerless. They thought I was defeated. They thought I would just accept my place as the forgotten daughter and move on with my life. They had no idea what I'd been learning. They had no idea what I'd found. They had no idea that by pushing me out, They'd given me the clarity I needed to see the situation for what it really was. That week, I filed a formal request with the probate court for complete documentation of the trust administration since my father's death. The documents that came back from the probate court were revealing. My mother, as the surviving spouse and new trustee, had been required to file annual reports. She hadn't filed a single one. The trust required distributions to the designated charity every year. Those distributions hadn't happened. There were required meetings with the foundation board. No records showed those meetings occurred. Nothing she'd done was criminal. It was simply negligence born from not understanding what was required. She'd assumed that because she was Dad's widow, everything automatically continued. She'd assumed that because Tyler was the obvious heir, the money would simply transfer. She'd assumed that trusts were simple things that handled themselves. She was wrong on all counts. And then I saw it. In the section outlining trust oversight, there was a clause I'd never seen before. If the primary trustee failed to meet their obligations for more than 6 months, the alternate authority could petition the court for review. The alternate authority could request temporary oversight. The alternate authority could ensure conditions were properly met. The alternate authority was me. My name was right there in black and white, listed as the person my father trusted to step in if things went wrong. I tried one more time to do this the right way. I called my mother and asked if we could meet for coffee. She agreed, sounding slightly surprised but not suspicious. We met at a cafe halfway between her house and my apartment. I brought copies of the trust documents. I calmly explained what I discovered. I pointed out the missed filings, the unfulfilled obligations, the conditions that hadn't been met. "Mom," I said gently, "I think there might be some requirements you're not aware of. I can help you understand them." She stared at me across the table, her expression hardening. "This is about you being jealous," she said coldly. "You can't stand that Tyler is successful." "This isn't about Tyler," I tried to explain. "This is about Dad's trust and what it requires." "Your father left me in charge," she said, standing up.
Not you.
"You need to move on with your life, Bethany, and stop trying to cause problems." She walked out of the cafe, leaving me sitting alone with my untouched coffee and stack of ignored documents. When I got home, there was a text from Tyler. "Stop harassing Mom. Just accept reality and move on." I stared at that text for a long time. Then I did exactly what they told me to do. I moved on. Just not in the way they expected. I stopped calling. I stopped texting. I stopped trying to explain anything to anyone. Instead, I focused on my own life and my own preparation. At work, I excelled. I learned everything I could about trust administration, estate law, and fiduciary responsibility. I took evening classes in nonprofit management. I built relationships with attorneys who specialized in estate law. I wasn't planning revenge. I was building understanding. I was preparing for the moment when their negligence would catch up with them. And I was making sure that when that moment came, I would know exactly what to do. 3 months passed quietly. I heard through mutual friends that Tyler had made an offer on a commercial property. He was planning to open a restaurant using money he expected from the inheritance. He'd even signed a lease, apparently, counting on funds being available within weeks. I said nothing. I did nothing. I just waited. Because I knew something Tyler didn't know. The trust funds weren't available. They couldn't be distributed until all the conditions were met. And none of the conditions had been met for over a year. The first crack appeared when my mother received a letter from the bank that held the trust accounts. They were requesting updated documentation and proof of compliance with trust terms. Standard procedure when large distributions were being requested. But my mother didn't have those documents. She didn't have proof of the required charitable distributions. She didn't have records of the oversight meetings. She didn't have the filed annual reports. She called Tyler in a panic. I know this because Tyler called me. "Do you know anything about trust paperwork Dad was supposed to file?" he asked, his tone frustrated. "Why would I know anything about that?" I replied calmly. "You were the one taking care of Dad," he said. "Did he give you any files or documents?" "He gave me some old papers," I said, truthfully. "I don't know if they're what you're looking for." "Can you look?" he asked, and for the first time in my life, I heard uncertainty in my voice. I'll think about it, I said, and ended the call. 2 days later, my mother called me directly. Bethany, I need to ask you something, she said, her voice strained. When you were handling your father's affairs, did he mention anything about annual reports? What kind of reports? I asked, knowing exactly what she meant. I don't know, she admitted. The bank is asking for them. Sorry, I said. I don't remember anything like that. I hung up feeling no satisfaction, just tired clarity. Over the next month, I watched from a distance as their confidence crumbled. Tyler's restaurant deal stalled when the expected funds didn't materialize. The bank put a hold on distribution requests until proper documentation was provided. An attorney representing the charitable foundation named in the trust sent a formal inquiry about missed distributions. My mother hired a lawyer, which cost her thousands just to understand what she should have understood from the beginning. Through all of this, they never once apologized for how they'd treated me. They never acknowledged that maybe they'd been wrong to dismiss me, to exclude me, to silence me. Instead, Tyler sent me angry messages accusing me of deliberately withholding information. My mother left voicemails insisting I had a responsibility to help family. But I said nothing. I explained nothing. I helped no one. Not because I wanted to hurt them, but because I finally understood that my help had never been valued. My presence had never been wanted. And I was done sacrificing my dignity for people who saw me as a tool to be used when convenient and ignored when not. 6 months after that first dinner, I received a formal email. Subject line, urgent family meeting required. The message was from my mother's attorney, requesting my presence at a family discussion regarding the trust. The tone was professional but desperate. They needed me now. I agreed to attend. The meeting was scheduled at the attorney's office, not at the family home. I arrived exactly on time, wearing professional clothes, carrying my own folder of documents. My mother looked exhausted. Tyler looked furious. The attorney, a middle-aged woman named Patricia, looked frustrated with all of them. Thank you for coming, Bethany, Patricia said. We need to discuss some complications with your father's trust. What complications? I asked calmly. There are conditions that weren't met, she explained. Requirements your father put in place that need to be fulfilled before distribution can happen. My mother started to speak, but Patricia held up her hand. Bethany, your mother and brother have been trying to sort this out for months, but we're missing critical information. We were hoping you might be able to help. I might be able to, I said slowly. Then I asked the one question I'd been waiting months to ask. But first, did anyone actually read the conditions my father put in the trust? The room went completely silent. Patricia looked at my mother and Tyler. Did you read the full trust document? She asked them. My mother shifted uncomfortably. I read the parts about beneficiaries, she said. I assumed the rest was standard legal language. Tyler said nothing. He hadn't read anything. Patricia sighed deeply. The conditions aren't standard, she said. Your husband was very specific about what needed to happen. Annual charitable distributions, oversight meetings, documentation of how funds were used, proof of beneficiary responsibility. What does that even mean? Tyler demanded. It means, I said quietly, that Dad didn't want the money handed over blindly. He wanted accountability. My mother's face went pale. Why didn't he tell me this? He probably thought you'd read the documents, I said, or ask questions, or involve the people he trusted to understand this. I opened my folder and placed several papers on the table. These are the records Dad kept. Every distribution he made, every meeting he attended, every report he filed. He did everything the trust required, every single year, without fail. Patricia picked up the papers, scanning them quickly. Her expression changed. This is exactly what we need, she said. Why didn't you share this before? I looked directly at my mother. Because nobody asked me. Nobody thought I had anything valuable to contribute. Remember? Tyler exploded. This is your fault, he shouted at me. You had these documents the whole time, and you just let us struggle. You're sabotaging me because you're jealous that Dad loved me more. I didn't raise my voice. Dad didn't love you more, I said calmly. He just let you believe you didn't have to earn anything. That's not true, my mother said, but her voice wavered. I took care of Dad for 3 years, I continued. I managed his medications, drove him to appointments, paid his bills, kept his records. Tyler visited twice a month for dinner. But somehow, Tyler was still the golden child who deserved everything. You chose to do those things, Tyler said. Nobody forced you. You're right, I said. I chose to do them because I loved Dad. But that doesn't mean I should be erased from the family because I'm not flashy or charming. It doesn't mean I should be silenced when I try to speak. Patricia cleared her throat. We're getting off track, she said. The immediate issue is that the trust distribution has been frozen by the court. Multiple entities have filed concerns about the lack of proper administration. My mother looked like she might cry. What does that mean? It means, Patricia explained, that until these issues are resolved, nobody gets anything. The meeting ended with Patricia requesting time to review everything. As we walked out, my mother grabbed my arm. Bethany, please, she said. I know we haven't treated you well, but this is serious. Tyler needs that money for his business. I need it for my retirement. Can you help us fix this? I looked at her tired face and felt nothing but emptiness. I'll consider it, I said. But there will be terms. What terms? Tyler demanded. I'll explain later, I said. First, I need to think about what I'm willing to do. I drove home feeling strange. They were asking for my help. Actually asking. But it wasn't because they valued me. It was because they needed me. There's a difference. That night, I wrote down exactly what I would and wouldn't accept. I wasn't interested in punishing anyone. I wasn't trying to steal the inheritance. I just wanted fairness. I wanted recognition. I wanted the respect I should have had all along. And I wanted to make sure my father's actual wishes were honored, not the version my family had invented to suit themselves. 2 days later, I sent an email to Patricia outlining my conditions. Then I waited. Patricia called me the next morning. Your terms are reasonable, she said. Actually, they're more generous than they deserve. My terms were simple. The trust would be properly administered according to my father's actual wishes. The required charitable distributions would be made immediately. An independent oversight board would be established to ensure future compliance. Tyler would receive his inheritance, but in structured payments over 5 years, not a lump sum. My mother would retain her widow's benefits, but would no longer serve as trustee. And I would serve as the oversight authority my father had designated me to be. This is what my father wanted, I explained to Patricia. He wasn't trying to keep the money from Tyler. He was trying to teach responsibility. Did your mother know this? Patricia asked. I thought about that question. I think Dad tried to tell her, I said. But she only heard what she wanted to hear. She heard Tyler gets the money and stopped listening to the rest. Patricia scheduled another family meeting to present the terms. When we gathered again, I explained everything. Dad didn't leave you a pile of money to spend however you wanted, I told Tyler. He left you a legacy to manage responsibly. My mother was quiet, processing this new understanding of her husband. I thought I knew what he wanted, she finally said. I thought he wanted to take care of Tyler. He did want to take care of Tyler, I said. But his version of care wasn't just handing over money. It was teaching values, responsibility, accountability, fairness. Over the next month, we worked with Patricia to restructure everything legally. It wasn't easy. Tyler fought against the 5-year payment plan at first, until Patricia explained that refusing it meant potentially getting nothing at all. My mother struggled with giving up control until she realized she'd never actually had control. She'd just been making decisions without understanding the framework my father had carefully built. I refused to be vindictive. I didn't cut anyone out. I didn't punish anyone. I just insisted that the trust be administered the way my father intended, the way he'd carefully documented, the way he'd trusted me to understand. The charitable distributions were made, months late but finally honored. The oversight board was established with 3 independent members plus me. Tyler received his first payment, which was substantial but not enough to fund his restaurant immediately. He would have to plan, budget, and build his business responsibly. Everything I'd wanted was actually what my father had wanted. I wasn't changing his legacy. I was protecting it. Word spread through the extended family. My aunt, the one who'd nodded along when Mom silenced me at that first dinner, called me. "I heard what happened with the trust," she said carefully. "I didn't know you were so involved in your father's affairs." "Nobody asked," I said simply. My uncle sent a formal email apologizing for not speaking up at family gatherings. "I should have said something," he wrote. "You deserved better." Cousins I hadn't heard from in years suddenly reached out, curious about what had really happened. The narrative had flipped. I wasn't the forgotten daughter anymore. I wasn't the one who could be dismissed and ignored. My mother's friends, who'd heard her version of events for months, started asking questions. "Why didn't you tell us Bethany was managing everything?" One of them asked my mother at church. My mother's social standing took a quiet hit. People realized she'd been misrepresenting the situation. She'd been painting herself as the overwhelmed widow and Tyler as the deserving son, while completely erasing my 3 years of caregiving. The truth had a way of changing how people saw things. Tyler made one last attempt to make me feel guilty. He showed up at my apartment unannounced on a Saturday morning. "You're happy now, right?" he said angrily. "You got what you wanted. You made me look like a spoiled child who doesn't deserve Dad's money." "I didn't make you look like anything," I said. "Your choices did that." "My choices," he laughed bitterly. "What choices? I'm the son. I'm supposed to inherit. Being the son doesn't mean you automatically deserve everything," I said. "Dad wanted you to earn it, to understand responsibility, to be accountable. You just wanted revenge," he insisted. "You wanted to humiliate me because I was Dad's favorite." I looked at my brother, really looked at him, and saw someone who'd never once questioned his place in the world, who'd never had to fight for recognition or respect, who'd been handed everything and learned nothing. "You weren't Dad's favorite," I said quietly. "You were just easier. I was the one who did the hard work, so you got to be the fun one. That's not the same as being loved more." He started to respond, but I held up my hand. "I'm done with this conversation," I said. "You'll get your inheritance. You'll build your business. You'll have everything Dad wanted you to have. But you'll do it the right way." I walked back inside my apartment and closed the door, leaving him standing in the hallway. Over the next year, I built a life I was proud of. I got promoted at the foundation and started managing larger trust portfolios. I moved into a better apartment with a view of the river. I started dating someone who actually listened when I spoke. I took a pottery class just because I wanted to. I traveled to places I'd always wanted to see. I did all of this without asking my family for permission, approval, or support. The inheritance, when it finally came to me, was modest. I wasn't a primary beneficiary like Tyler. But there was a provision my father had included specifically for me. A trust fund for education or business ventures. An acknowledgement of my role as caretaker. An expression of gratitude in legal language that meant more than any words spoken at family dinners. I used part of it to finish my master's degree. Part of it went into savings. And part of it I donated to the same charities my father had supported for decades. I secured my own future independent of family approval or recognition. And for the first time in my life, I felt truly free. Tyler's restaurant eventually opened 2 years later, funded by careful budgeting and structured payments. It was smaller than he'd originally planned, but sustainable. He'd learned, slowly and painfully, what it meant to build something through actual work. My mother sold the family home and moved to a smaller place. The money from the sale, combined with her widow's benefits from the trust, gave her a comfortable retirement. She'd learned, though she never quite admitted it, that control without understanding is just an illusion. My aunt and uncle faded into the background where they belonged. I saw them at occasional family events, but we never discussed what had happened. Everyone ended up exactly where their choices placed them. Tyler had an opportunity to build something real. My mother had financial security. I had freedom and self-respect. The trust continued operating as my father intended, distributing funds responsibly and supporting the charities he'd cared about. Justice without cruelty. Fairness without revenge. Everything my father had wanted when he carefully structured his legacy all those years ago. 2 years after that first terrible dinner, my mother asked to meet me for coffee. We sat in the same cafe where she'd once walked out on me. This time, she stayed. "I've been thinking a lot about what happened," she said carefully. "About how I treated you." I waited. "I was wrong," she said, the words clearly difficult for her. "I was wrong to silence you. Wrong to exclude you. Wrong to act like you didn't matter." I didn't make it easy for her. I didn't rush to say it was okay. "Why did you do it?" I asked. She was quiet for a long time. "Because Tyler was easier to understand," she finally said. "He wanted obvious things. Success, money, recognition. You wanted things I didn't understand. Respect, acknowledgement, to be seen." "Those aren't complicated things," I said. "I know," she said. "But somehow I made them complicated. I made you the responsible one, so I could make Tyler the special one. And in doing that, I forgot you were both my children." We talked for 2 hours. It wasn't a complete reconciliation. Too much had been broken for that. But it was honest. She finally listened. Really listened. Without defending herself or making excuses. And that was more than I'd ever expected. I sit now in my own home, a small house I bought last year with my savings and the trust fund my father left me. In my office is a photo of Dad and me from my college graduation. He's smiling, proud, his hand on my shoulder. I keep his coffee mug on my desk, the one I took from his office after he died. Sometimes I think about that first dinner, about standing at that table trying to speak, about being told to sit down, about being erased, about being invisible. I was never powerless. I just didn't know my own strength yet. My father knew. That's why he put my name in the trust as the fallback authority. That's why he told me to keep copies of everything. That's why he said I was stronger than I thought. He was preparing me for the moment when I would need to stand up not with loud words, but with quiet authority. Not with anger, but with understanding. Not by destroying anyone, but by simply refusing to remain invisible. I didn't get revenge. I got justice. I didn't take anything that wasn't mine. I protected what was meant to be protected. And in doing that, I found myself. The doorbell rings. It's Vanessa, my former roommate and now my closest friend, coming over for dinner. I close my laptop and head to the door, smiling. My story isn't about an inheritance. It's about learning that silence can be broken. That power doesn't require cruelty. That sometimes the strongest thing you can do is simply refuse to disappear. And that's exactly what I did.